Hey, how are you doing? We're here making another video for you guys. Um, for moving forward, we thought we'd make this a little bit more interactive. And so for what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick little sermon that I feel that is pertinent for what we're doing. And then we're going to also do some question and answer sessions from questions that either you guys ask us or questions that are commonly asked around the internet. And thankfully, we've got a couple questions already submitted to us, so we will begin that within this video. So hang on and enjoy. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about misconceptions about Jesus. I don't want to make the misconception of assuming what you do know or what you don't know about Jesus or God, and I don't want to assume things that may or may not be true for you guys. So I thought for the first few videos we may go back to the basics, understand what he was, what his purpose was, and where we could go from here. So one question that's often raised, especially in this political climate, is, was Jesus a Palestinian? This question you would normally think would be a no-brainer. No, he was a Jew. But was he? Yes, he was a Jew, and he was born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was within a greater region at the time called Judea. But to understand the context of everything, you have to go back in time to figure out what that land was called and know what Jesus was in relation to everything. In the very beginning, according to the Bible, the land was owned and controlled by the Canaanites. The Canaanites had different towns like Jericho and so on and so forth. And this is all pre-Moses time. At that time, God said because of their sins, because of their child sacrifices and abominations, he was going to give the land to the Jews for a forever homeland. And so he promised that land to Abraham, he promised that land to Moses, and at the time of Exodus, he brought the Jews, eventually, to that land. After Moses took over the land went through several changes throughout time in history. Most notably, changes include the time of Solomon when he built the temple around 1000 BCE, the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians, which was talked about in the 2 Kings, which is around 586, the Persian Empire, Hellenistic Empire, going down to the time of the Roman conquest. After that, Romans destroyed the area of Jerusalem and Judea around 70 AD. And then it continued under Constantine. Muhammad took it over a few times. Christians took it over a few times. And then the Muslims took it over some more. And it continued that way up until the British Mandate of 1917. And then after that, it became the land of Israel. But during the time of Jesus, it was considered Judea. It was controlled by the Jews, although Romans had a overarching control of the land in the area. And so Jesus was not a Palestinian. It wasn't called Palestine until Romans took it over in 70 AD. What they would do is they would call the land they call lands that they conquered in the name of their enemies. Now, throughout history, the Jews' enemies were Philistines. And so when they took over the land in 70 AD, they called it Palestinia in regards to the Philistines, the Jews' enemy at the time. They did it as an insult to Israel and the Jews, and it went back and forth that way throughout time. So no, Jesus was not a Palestinian. You could make a greater argument saying that Jesus was a Roman, because the Romans controlled the land at that time. But no, Jesus was not Palestinian. Now, another misconception people have is, was Jesus a revolutionary, or was he a pacifist? Some people have a concept of him as being a long-haired hippie, and other people have a idea of him as being a conqueror. And this definitely comes in play when we have issues such as the left-wing Democrats who try to say that he loved everyone, he embraced everyone, he was a hippie at heart. And then you have the other side where you have people on the Islamic side who said that he was a conqueror, he was a warrior, and go as far as say that he was a Muslim. Neither are really correct. He was more of a centrist more than anything else. He did not come to wage war. He never killed anybody. So the conqueror idea is out the window. He told a lot of parables and a lot of stories, a lot of corrections to the Jewish understandings of the day. At that time, there was lots of misconceptions as far as what was and wasn't allowed within the Jewish religion. And he sought to have lots of corrections and lots of realignments, if you will, to that Jewish mindset. He was an Orthodox Jew. He went to synagogue every Sabbath, and he was considered a rabbi at the time. He had lots of disagreements with Jewish leaders, which put him into contention a lot of the times. And he didn't necessarily do exactly what the Jews wanted him to do when they wanted him to do it. Jesus was very vocal as far as what he wanted. He was very vocal as far as what the Jews needed to do. And you have to understand the Jewish culture today and back then. They had what was considered a Torah, which was the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And they also had the prophets and the poetic books. And for the most part, that encompasses all of what we would know as our Old Testament. They also had what was considered their traditions, and this would be in their Talmud. And these are oral traditions that they believe was passed on from the time of Moses. Most of that stuff is neither here or there, and a lot of stuff is very cut and dry, or nitty-gritty, if you will. But all that stuff Jesus didn't necessarily agree with. He didn't necessarily agree with their traditions. And this got him in contention a lot of the times with the leadership of the Jews. Jesus was trying to redirect them back into the traditional Torah and the Jewish Bible, which included prophets and poetic books. But the Jews wanted to have him conform to their traditions, and that didn't necessarily jive well with Jesus. And so this is why he gets the misconception of being a revolutionary, because he had different ideas than them, but he was not a military leader. He told people not to engage in conflict, but he also was very critical and very sharp with his words. He would go as far as calling the Jewish leaders at the time vipers, and when they would give him a coin asking who they should pay taxes to, really hoping that Jesus would go and say, you shouldn't pay taxes to anybody. He would grab a coin and says, whose image is on this coin? And they would say it was Caesar's. And Jesus would say, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And this caused lots of problems with the Jewish leaders of that time, who was looking for a revolutionary, who was looking for a warrior, but he was not a revolutionary, and he was not a warrior. Jesus said on his trial of Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. For if it were, my servants would fight for me and prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but my kingdom is from another place. Are you king? Or you are king then? Said Pilate. Jesus said, you say I'm king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world was to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. To that, Pilate says, what is truth? And he kind of walked away. So there's more stuff we could get into with this entire topic, but I thought I could stop what I'm doing now. I've got some more stuff to go into, but I'll go into that with another video. But I'm going to address some of your questions. So here's a question and answer time. The first question today is, and this is pretty relevant considering we just finished with Christmas, was Jesus born on December 25th? No. Okay, next question. It's a little bit more complicated than that. We don't necessarily know what day Jesus was born because it wasn't recorded within the Bible. We have lots of hints as far as the time that Jesus was born. For instance, we know that there was a census being taken place during the time. It talks about shepherds being out in the fields, and there's lots of concerns that if perhaps it was the middle of December, it may be too cold for the shepherds to be outside in the middle of the night. There's lots of hints here and there, but the fact is we don't necessarily know when Jesus was born. It doesn't really matter exactly when he was born, since we're not celebrating the date as much as we are celebrating the occasion. And so it's one of those days that throughout time we kind of planted our flag saying this is the day we're going to celebrate his birth. And we kind of went from there. Now there is some interesting line of reasonings that people have made throughout the years. And some of them are a little bit more credible than others. For instance, the Bible talks about in the book of Luke that Jesus' uncle, if you will, was inside the temple when he got the word that his wife was going to have a son, which would go on to be John the Baptist. Now, the Bible says that when Martha, which was John the Baptist's mother, Jesus' aunt, was 6 months pregnant, Mary got the word that she was going to have Jesus. Now, we naturally assume that these are pretty subsequent events. They may have been delayed by a month or two. This is all speculation. And we know that the only time that anybody could have been inside the temple, or the Holy of Holies at the time, was one time a year, and that was the time of Passover. The Passover usually tends to be in April, give or take, sometimes in March, sometimes in April. And so if we get that, and then fast forward 6 months, or let's say 6-7 months, that could be in the time that Mary would have gotten word that Jesus was going. This was about the time when Jesus would have been announced to Mary. And there is a tradition that people assumed the date of your life, your birthday, if you will, to be the date of conception, not necessarily the date that you were actually born, because that's when you would have had a heartbeat. That's when you were considered alive at that time. And so if you take that timeline, you come pretty close to December 25th, give or take, with that time. So there is speculation that goes that way. The earliest known tradition that we have of December 25th as being his birthday is actually found in an old commentary written around 200 AD. This commentary, written by Hippolytus of Rome, in the commentary of Daniel, page 140, he writes, "For the first advent of the Lord in the flesh, when he was born in Bethlehem, was December 25th, Wednesday, while Augustus was in his 42nd year, but from Adam 5,500 years, he suffered in the 33rd year, March 25th, Friday, the 18th year of Tiberius Caesar, and Rufus and Rubilian were consuls." So in that commentary, he gives credence to December 25th as being Jesus' birthday. Once again, that is the earliest known writing of that date. And so as of 280, Christians were worshiping his birth on that date. And then he also gives a date for the crucifixion. Now, there's always going to be some people who try to tie ties with paganism, such as Saturnalia or winter solstice. And there's lots of debate as far as how close those events would have come in and whether they have any applied attributes to December 25th. And I could refer you to a lot of those videos that talk about that. Long answer is there really is no concrete date to December 25th to those other events. They are close, within weeks of each other. But you can't necessarily say December 25th was a pagan origin because of da-da-da-da-da. There is no concrete date for that date for those events. And so, how exactly they came up with December 25th? And before anybody says, this is not tied with Catholicism. A lot of people try to say that Christmas is Christ's Mass. And so they try to say that it was an advent of the time of Constantine. This is well over 100 years before Constantine, before Catholicism ever took over. And so that isn't necessarily a connection. And our last question that we're going to answer today was another user-submitted question, and it is, who was Cain's wife? Now, this is another question that is often asked when it comes to apologetics, and it is one of those questions that we don't necessarily have a solid answer for. We have a good guess as far as who it could be, and it's not something that most people like to hear, fortunately or unfortunately. In the 5th book of Genesis, it talks about the lineage after Adam. Now, the first humans, according to the Bible, had much longer lives than we do now. And there's no concrete date that the Bible gives for Abel and Cain. Adam's first and second sons, or Cain and Abel, whatever. There's no concrete dates as to when they were born in relation to Adam. The Bible doesn't give it. It doesn't give it the separation of ages between the two. And in the 5th book of Genesis, it says Adam had other sons and daughters. And so it is widely assumed, fairly enough, that Cain was the firstborn. Some things that give credence to that is how the Bible mentions when Eve had Cain, which was after the curse. She said, God has given me a male to redeem us, because she naturally thought that Cain was going to be the redeemer that God promised, but he wasn't. Now, Abel, we naturally assume, was the second son, but once again, that's an assumption. He probably was the second son. He could have been the third or fourth son. We don't necessarily know for certain. Now, the Bible also says that he had other sons and daughters. And so it is a safe assumption at the time that he had other daughters, probably in between the two children, or perhaps after they had Cain and Abel. And the only concrete date that the Bible gives is the birth of Seth. And Seth is the first child that we believe after the death of Abel. And it says that Adam was 140 years old when he had Seth. So we don't know the timeline between when Cain killed Abel to when he had Seth. We don't know how long after they were kicked out of Eden before she had Cain. It is possible that Cain could have been in his 50s or 60s, maybe even older when he killed Abel. And so if they had other sons and daughters that aren't recorded, but we know they had them, it is very likely that he had a sister for his wife. Or perhaps Abel had a daughter, and maybe his wife was going to be Abel's daughter, or another sibling's daughter. And so, yes, it does lead questions to the case of incest, and that's a common rebuke or common rebuttal to this argument. And incest was an issue, but it was only an issue brought up during the time of Moses, and that was 2,500 years after Adam. Now, there are lots of reasons why this could be, why God didn't mind incest until Moses. And for what it's worth, Abraham was married to a stepsister, and within all understandings, that would be considered incest as well. But, and obviously God didn't condone that or didn't rebuke that. And Abraham was before Moses. All that aside, there's also thoughts and understandings that humans were a lot healthier and a lot more in line with God in God's original creation at the time, which accounted for the longer lifespans. And it is an interesting study done by Human Genome Project, where they talk about mutations within the human genome and how they've been accelerating even more throughout these years. But it's been a quick multiplications throughout the years, which means it would have been slower back then, going back to the original creation. And the Human Genome Project actually comes up with a date pretty close to what we would consider the date of creation. when they trace mutations backwards. So it very well could be that at the time of Adam and Eve, all the way through Moses, that the mutations were very minimal at best. And so common issues with people having incest relationships with children and mutations and deformities were not as big of a thing back then because they were closer to the original creation. Once again, that's all assumption, but considering all the evidence, it looks pretty conclusive in that direction. So, quick answer to a long answer. It was probably a sister or a niece. Anywho, thank you for today, and we've got more questions that we'll be going over in the next video that we do with you guys. And we'll do a few more kind of intro videos until we get into more meatier topics. Thanks for listening in. Don't forget to hit the like and share this video with anybody that you think would benefit from this video. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later. And bye.